Hi guys, I'm back for another episode of Let's Talk About It with Abby Hansen from the Orlando Valkyries. Abby, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good seeing your face again.
You too. No, but I just want to talk to you about pro volleyball in the US. This has been something for me that's been so exciting. I've said before, my mom played professional basketball and she played overseas and she played basketball and was graduating from college around the same time of what's going on right now for volleyball. All these new pro leagues starting and the opportunity to go overseas, and I think it's really cool. We have two major pro leagues in the US right now, PVF and then LOVB, like people will say. And then there's also Athletes Unlimited, which is its totally own other thing. For you, you were drafted to play in the PVF. Why are there two different leagues, and why are athletes kind of choosing one or the other? Can you give us some insight?
I think having pro volleyball in the US was definitely something that needed to be well planned, well thought out. Both League One and PVF have been really planning and digging deep and creating those relationships. I think a lot of it, yes, there's going to be that competitive edge of which league is recruiting the best players and who's doing what. And there's going to be that. I mean, it's inevitable. But at the same time, you got to appreciate this moment that we're in right now, where by year two of the professional era being in the United States, we already have two leagues.
Yeah.
And I know that's a very extended answer for your first question, but that kind of gives, the listeners a glimpse of how big of a deal it is to have pro volleyball here in the US.
Yeah, it's true. If you go on any given day now, there's probably a pro volleyball game being played somewhere that day. And that's really cool about it. People will say oh, how are there going to be two leagues and all this stuff? But if you look back at professional sports league startings, there was almost always two leagues, and either they would merge or one would, last longer than the others. But major football, the NBA, the WNBA, they all had competition at some point, and it honestly sometimes makes it better in the end for these sports because you can test out and see different leagues do things differently and what works. When you think about people who are playing in League One versus people playing in the PVF, what is the main difference that you've seen?
That's a good question. I think it's kind of hard to answer that at the very moment because League One is fairly new.
Yeah.
There were several players that went from PVF to League One this year, but the reasons varied. I chose to stay in PVF because of, the locations of the teams and just the familiarity of it. And honestly, I had a great time last year, so why would I leave? I think both have very different or kind of different business strategies, but I wouldn't say one is better than the other. At this point, it's just your pick of the choosing, and go with it.
No, I agree with you. And it's interesting too because everyone says League One has the fan base because they have all of the clubs. But if you think about it, PVF does too, because PVF has the draft. And so you have all of these college fans who are watching, their favorite players. You're watching Merritt Beeson, you're watching Anna DeBeer, all these players get drafted and go to these different cities. And so many of the girls are getting drafted to teams that are close or in the same cities as their college town, which is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
With you finished at UCF and then you were in Orlando. Imagine you were able to see some people who would go to the UCF games at your home.
Absolutely.
I personally want to play overseas, leave the US. I think the opportunity to play in the US is huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Going overseas is definitely a different experience. Talking to some of the girls that came from overseas, someone in particular that pops up is Shina Joseph, and her and I had a conversation last year where we were in San Diego, we're sitting having breakfast, and she goes, you should try going overseas. It's something different. It's a cultural experience that you're not going to get anywhere else, and you are going to grow so much as a person. But there's also a good chunk of girls that had that 9-month overseas experience and said, get me out of here. I want to go back home. Can I do this at home? And at first it was no.
Yeah. And as a player too, it's if you're one of these big stars coming out of college, or even if not, your opportunities in the US in terms of building a brand or continuing as a volleyball player or as an athlete, I do feel you can have a little bit of a better opportunity playing in America with that. The brands that you might have done NIL with, or the fans who came, they're located here.
They can carry over.
Right, it carry over, and that's maybe financial, but also just the support. Like, my parents came to basically every match. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
my dad was one match this season, and my mom came to everything she could. She lives a lot farther away. It's like, it's really hard for me to imagine, like, my parents not physically being at a game. I wanna talk, though, about starting the league, right? We talked about all, like, the great benefits, but how has, year 2 compared to year 1 so far?
I think a lot of those growing pains have been ironed out for sure. A lot of different details were left up to each individual team. So you saw how that varied and which teams, put certain factors higher on the hierarchy.
Mhm.
Where they were practicing, what type of court were they practicing on, when their times were. We were able to kind of see the differences, and we're all chatty Cathy, so we're all talking to one another on different teams and whatnot. So with, of course, some filters when it comes time to competing. But yeah, so that was one thing in particular. I'm trying to think if there was even just trying to figure out, how do some of these coaches coach girls have been playing, like, maybe some longer years than they've ever played volleyball? How do you create these relationships? How do you coach some of these players that are coming in really confident and have had some of the best coaches in the world? So that was, a little bit of other things to kind of pick apart and figure out along the road. But I think, again, there was so much growth in the league last year, and we're already seeing so much growth this year.
Yeah, that's really what makes it so fun for me. So, like, I was watching your game the other day, or the first match of the season, and Orlando is playing San Diego Mojo, which I'm sorry, I love you, but the Mojo will be my team. I'm from San Diego.
That's crazy.
But every time you're playing, I'm rooting for you. But watching that, it was just so cool to me because there were so many people on both teams that I've either actually played with and were on my teams, like in club, that coached me while I was in club or in college, or who I watched like as a high school athlete. Awesome to me. We have like generations of Texas volleyball playing in League One. Like if you've ever wondered what would it be like if like Chiaka and Maddie Skinner were on the same team, like what would that
Now
look like?
you have it.
You get to find out. Like that's so fun.
Another way that last year kind of differs from this year is this year we're doing an all-star match. It's on February 22nd in Indianapolis. And so basically the all-stars are voted upon in 3 rounds of voting. I believe it's the league, the coaches, and the players all get to kind of have their say in who participates in this all-star match. And we got free airtime from CBS to host this. So it's super sick, national television, and we decided to use that for an all-star match. So that'll be different, new, exciting.
That's exactly the kind of thing that I feel like will only make volleyball better and also bigger as a sport. Like just random person, like they're gonna be able to watch that and they're gonna see the best volleyball possible. But you don't need to know anything about volleyball to have a fun time. It's just like, wow, that girl just hit the crap out of that ball. And I don't understand how that girl just dove across the court to get it. Like that's so fun. It's gonna grow the sport. That's the kind of thing we need to keep seeing, honestly, from both leagues.
Definitely another cool bit to see. And like on touching on, anyone can watch it. I mean, Derek, my husband's in the military, and so all of his guys, some mornings they wake up at 6 a.m. and they tie a net to, whatever they can on base, and they play volleyball in the morning. But a couple of them have been watching our games, the Orlando Valkyries, and the commentary that I'm getting on text afterwards is hilarious. They have their opinions. They know they're trying to learn all the different terminology. So stuff like that though is so enjoyable for me to like have a conversation about, because it's just someone new that's never bothered to watch volleyball before, and just makes me laugh a little bit too. So I laugh a lot actually.
My dad has gotten into volleyball so much. He was calling me the other day, like, when does the games start again? Like when does the pro season start? And then he's like, okay, I'm gonna turn it on. He's flipping back and forth the college football semifinals. Like he is like, okay, this set I'm watching, and then I'll watch, the next quarter. Like he
Yeah.
prioritizing volleyball. There's so many people out there like that who want to love volleyball, who just needed the platform and the opportunity. And so I'm really excited that we have these leagues to do that. And I'm excited to see what happens with volleyball in the future. Abby, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I can't wait to cheer you on this season.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So good seeing you.
Hey guys, it's Sydney. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk About It. If you did, make sure to leave a review and send it to a friend. Let's keep this conversation going. I'll see you guys next week.